I flew 12 hours to surprise my husband on his cabin trip and overheard him conspiring. After flying 12 hours through 3 delays to surprise my husband on his guy's weekend at the cabin, I walked in with his favorite bourbon and heard him say, if she disappeared, that insurance money could clear my debts. His friend laughed, or finally date her sister without feeling guilty. I left the bourbon. By the next morning, I was in Costa Rica. 2 weeks later, his sister called me crying. The bottle of bourbon felt heavy in my hands as I stood in front of the cabin door. My heart raced with anticipation. After traveling 12 hours to surprise David, I then heard his voice through the weathered wood, words that froze the smile on my face and shattered my world into 1,000 sharp pieces. If she disappeared, that insurance money could clear my debts. My husband's voice was casual, almost thoughtful, like he was discussing the weather. A burst of laughter followed, then his friend's voice again, or finally date her sister without feeling guilty. More laughter. My fingers tightened around the bottle of Blanton's, his favorite bourbon that I had carefully wrapped with a red ribbon. The gift I had carried across 3 states through endless delays suddenly felt like a prop in someone else's play. I grew up surrounded by wealth. My father built his real estate empire from nothing, making sure that neither my sister Amelia nor I would ever want for anything. When I met David at a charity fundraiser 3 years ago, he seemed refreshingly uninterested in my family's fortune. He was charming, driven, studying for his MBA, and full of dreams. I fell quickly and deeply in love. David needs time to get established, I explained to my father when he questioned why my new husband hadn't signed the prenup. He's sensitive about the money gap. I trust him. My father's worried frown should have been my first warning. Sophia, love should not require financial sacrifice. Remember that. I didn't listen. Instead, I supported David's consulting business when traditional investors wouldn't. I paid off his student loans as a first anniversary gift. I bought the house he wanted, in the neighborhood he chose. Every time he claimed a setback in his business, I wrote another check, believing in the partnership I thought we were building. My sister tried to warn me in her gentle way. He asks a lot about our family trusts, Sophia. It's strange. I dismissed her concerns as overprotectiveness. He's just trying to understand our world, I insisted. Standing outside that cabin door, all those warnings came crashing down on me. Yesterday had been normal, a video call with David where he talked about the cabin weekend, how the guys were playing poker and hiking. He mentioned missing me. I had smiled, already knowing I was going to surprise him, having secretly booked my flight weeks earlier. The decision to surprise him came during one of my lonely nights in our too-large house. 2 years supporting his dreams while mine gathered dust. 2 years believing his excuses when he missed dinner with my family. 2 years ignoring how he casually mentioned my sister's accomplishments, with a glint in his eyes that made me uncomfortable. Babe, I can't make it this weekend. The guy's trip is sacred. No wives allowed, he had said last week, kissing my forehead. You understand. And I did. I understood his need for space, for time with friends. What I didn't understand was why it always had to be me doing the understanding. So I decided, just this once, to put my desires first. To see his face light up when I arrived unexpectedly. To remind him why we fell in love. The journey had been a nightmare of technical issues and weather delays. First, a mechanical problem kept us grounded for 2 hours in Chicago. Then storms diverted us to Indianapolis. The final flight was delayed another 3 hours due to crew scheduling issues. I sat in uncomfortable airport chairs, checking my watch constantly and clutching my carry-on that contained the $200 bourbon I had specially ordered. A woman beside me at the last gate noticed my agitation. Someone special waiting? My husband, I answered, smiling despite my exhaustion. He has no idea I'm coming. Those are the best surprises, she said, patting my hand. Through it all, I held on to the image of David's surprised face, imagining his arms wrapping around me, telling his friends, see what an amazing wife I have? Now I stood frozen outside the wooden door of cabin number 8, the revelation still echoing in my ears. How much is the policy again? David's friend asked. $2 million, he replied. It took some convincing to get her to sign the papers. I told her it was for our future family. I pressed my hand against my mouth to muffle any sound. My legs trembled, but somehow kept me standing. "Dude, that's cold," another voice said, though he was laughing. "Cold? It's strategic," David replied. "Her father is worth 9 figures. Her sister is single and way more fun. Sophia is sweet but boring, always worried about disappointing daddy." Something inside me, something that had been bending for 2 years, finally broke. A memory surfaced, David casually suggesting we go skydiving, rock climbing, scuba diving, all activities that could end in tragedy. I had thought he was being adventurous. Now I understood he had been seeking opportunities for accidents. The bourbon bottle nearly slipped from my grip. I quietly set it down by the door, carefully removing the gift tag with my name on it. My wedding ring caught the porch light, its diamonds suddenly looking gaudy and fake, just like our marriage. I walked away from the door, leaving my designer suitcase forgotten next to the bourbon. Through the cabin window, I caught a glimpse of them, David and 3 friends, cards and cash on the table, beers in hand. My husband smiled, completely at ease while discussing my death. This man, who had kissed me goodbye at the airport 3 days ago. This man, who had vowed to love me in sickness and in health. This man, who had access to every account, every asset I owned. My wedding ring felt like it was burning my skin. I twisted it off and removed it as I walked back to my rental car, my mind replaying all the signs I had ignored, the questions about my life insurance, the subtle distancing from my friends and family, the accidental run-ins with my sister. As I slipped into the driver's seat, I placed my wedding ring in the cup holder, a small, glittering testimony to a marriage built on lies. For a brief moment, I considered confronting him, imagined the satisfaction of seeing his face when he realized he had been found out. But self-preservation won. If he was willing to consider my death for money, what else might he do if cornered? I started the engine and drove away from the cabin that held the ruins of my marriage. The tears finally came, but beneath the devastation, something else was forming, a cold, clear determination. By morning, I would be in Costa Rica. Minimum 100%. By the time David returned home, I would be officially missing. Let him sweat. Let him wonder. Let him face those debt collectors alone. I may have been raised with wealth and privilege, but my father also taught me something David had clearly forgotten: never underestimate a woman with resources and a reason for revenge. My hands didn't shake as I sat in my rental car in the dimly lit parking lot a mile from the cabin. That surprised me. The numbness had settled in, wrapping around me like a protective shield. I pulled out my phone and opened the airline app, one-way ticket, the farthest place I could think of on short notice. The confirmation email for Costa Rica arrived seconds later. No hesitation, no second thoughts. I drove to the nearest 24-hour pharmacy, bought a prepaid phone, and activated it in the parking lot. Then I called my assistant. "Megan, I need you to do something for me." No questions. "Of course, Mrs. Reynolds. Is everything all right? I'm taking an emergency personal trip. I need you to cancel all my appointments for the next month. If anyone asks, including David, you haven't heard from me since yesterday." Pause. "Should I be worried about you?" "No," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "I just need time. I'll be in touch when I can." I hung up and removed the battery from my regular phone. David could track that. The GPS in the rental car could also be tracked. I returned it to the airport and took a rideshare to a different airport in the neighboring state. Every decision was calculated, mechanical, as if someone else were moving my body while I watched from a distance. The red-eye flight was half empty. As the plane lifted into the darkness, memories flickered in my mind like an old slideshow, recontextualizing themselves in the harsh light of tonight's revelation. David commenting on my sister's dress at Christmas dinner. Amelia has always had good taste. The way his eyes lingered. His suggestion that I change my will after we got married. It's what responsible couples do. The hiking trip where he insisted on taking photos of me near cliffs. Just step back a little more, babe. The swimming accident last summer when I nearly drowned after he encouraged me to swim farther from shore than I was comfortable with. "You're stronger than you think," he had said. And somehow, he wasn't nearby when I began to struggle. His casual dismissal of my fertility concerns. We have plenty of time to have kids. Let's just enjoy being us for now. He had been waiting for the insurance policy to clear. The pieces fit together into a gruesome mosaic. I wasn't a wife to him. I was a walking bank account with an expiration date of his choosing. The flight attendant tapped my shoulder, startling me. "Ma'am, would you like some water?" I realized I had been crying silently. 16 hours and 3 flights later, I emerged into the humid air of Costa Rica. My hastily packed suitcase contained 3 outfits, basic toiletries, my passport, and an envelope with $5,000 in cash that I had kept for emergencies. I had withdrawn another $10,000 from an ATM during my layover, hitting the daily limit. My credit cards remained untouched, those could be tracked. The taxi driver didn't speak much English, which suited me fine. I showed him the name of a small hotel I had found online during my layover, not a resort, nothing fancy, nothing David would ever think to look for me in. Playa Hermosa. He nodded and pulled away from the airport. Through the window, lush vegetation and colorful buildings blurred together. I was 3,000 miles from home, from the life I had built, from the husband who had been planning my death. My wedding ring finger felt bare, its tan lines contrasting against my skin. The hotel, Posada del Mar, stood on a quiet stretch of beach, its faded blue paint peeling in the salty air. The lobby consisted of a small front desk and a few rattan chairs. A ceiling fan spun lazily overhead. The older woman at the desk smiled warmly. "Reservation?" "No," I hesitated. "Do you have any rooms available for a few weeks?" She looked me over, disheveled, exhausted, eyes swollen from silent tears. Whatever she saw made her nod gently. "We have an ocean view room." Very quiet. When she pushed the registration card toward me, I hesitated only briefly before writing, Sophia Reynolds, my maiden name. A name I hadn't used in 2 years. A name that felt both foreign and like coming home. "Just you, Mrs. Reynolds?" "Yes, just me." "Vacation?" I paused, unsure how to answer. "Starting over." Something in her eyes softened with understanding. She handed me a key, an actual metal key, not a key card. "Room 8. Upstairs at the end of the hall. Very private." The irony of another room 8 didn't escape me. I had stood outside a cabin door and lost everything. Now I was stepping into another room 8 to begin again. The room was simple, white walls, tile floor, a queen bed with a blue quilt, and double doors that opened onto a small balcony overlooking the ocean. The bathroom had a shower with inconsistent water pressure, no air conditioning, just a ceiling fan. Nothing like the luxury hotels David and I used to stay in. It was perfect. I dropped my suitcase and walked to the balcony. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The waves beat rhythmically against the shore. For the first time since I had heard those devastating words, I took a deep breath. Night fell quickly in Costa Rica. I lay on the unfamiliar bed in the dark, listening to the ocean and the strange sounds of nocturnal creatures. Reality began to crack through my protective numbness. My chest tightened, my breathing grew shallow. Everything I had been holding in came crashing down. I curled into myself, sobs racking my body, muffled by the pillow I clutched to my face. I cried for the woman who had loved so blindly. For the future I thought I had. For the betrayal so deep I couldn't comprehend its edges. "He wanted me dead," I whispered into the darkness, the words making it real. The tears kept coming until there were none left, leaving me hollow and spent. I crawled to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and caught my reflection in the mottled mirror. I barely recognized myself. The woman staring back at me had shadows under her eyes and a hardness in her mouth that hadn't been there before. I returned to the bed and stayed awake as the night hours crept by. The ceiling fan cast shifting shadows across the walls. Somewhere nearby, music played faintly, then faded. The ocean continued its endless conversation with the shore. When the first light of dawn filtered through the thin curtains, I moved to the balcony and watched the sun rise over the horizon, painting the water in gold. Birds called to one another in the nearby trees. The world continued as if everything were normal, as if my life hadn't imploded. I had left everything behind, my home, my clothes, my identity as David's wife. All I had was myself. And for the first time in years, I wondered if that might be enough. A knock at the door startled me. The hotel owner stood there with a tray. Coffee, fresh fruit, and toast, on the house, she said simply. The first day is always the hardest. As she turned to leave, I found my voice. How did you know? She gave me a gentle smile. You're not the first woman to arrive on our shore looking for a new beginning, Senora. And you won't be the last. After she left, I poured the strong coffee and watched the beach come to life below. Locals walked their dogs. A fisherman pushed his boat into the surf. None of them knew me. None of them had expectations. For the first time since I had heard those devastating words through the cabin door, I felt something other than pain. I felt possibility. Those words became my mantra over the following days. I repeated them to myself each morning as I watched the sunrise from my balcony, coffee in hand, a ritual that Sophia, the hotel owner, had established without asking. She would appear at my door each morning, tray in hand, a gentle smile on her time-worn face. On my third day, when I tried to pay her for the daily breakfast service, she pushed my money away with a gesture. Heal first. Then we talk business, she said firmly. That afternoon, she knocked on my door again. Come walk with me. I hesitated, but something in her maternal authority made me follow her. We walked along the shoreline, her sandaled feet leaving perfect impressions in the damp sand. My husband left me for my cousin 20 years ago, she said without preamble. I wanted to die. Then I bought this hotel. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. I stopped. How did you know? Sophia smiled. Your eyes have the look of a betrayed woman. Different details, same pain. She gestured toward the horizon. Costa Rica has a way of rebuilding broken people. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching tourists laugh on the beach below, couples holding hands, families building sandcastles, and I felt a sudden, overwhelming isolation. I had spent 3 days hiding in my room, tending to wounds no one could see. But what was I hiding from? David didn't know where I was. No one did. The next morning, I ventured out before Sophia's breakfast delivery. The sand felt cool beneath my feet as I walked along the shore, watching the sky shift from navy to pink to bright blue. A local vendor was setting up his fruit stand, arranging mangoes and pineapples into colorful patterns. Buenos dias, he called, motioning for me to come closer. He sliced a piece of mango and handed it to me. The sweetness exploded in my mouth, a reminder that pleasure still existed in this world. This became another ritual, morning walks, fresh fruit, smiles exchanged with locals who expected nothing from me. Each day I ventured a little farther from the hotel. Each day the weight in my chest lightened, little by little. A week into my self-imposed exile, I passed a small beauty salon nestled between a souvenir shop and a cafe. Through the window, I caught my reflection, long hair tied back in my signature neat ponytail. David had always loved my hair. He called it my crown. He would complain every time I suggested cutting it. Before I could reconsider, I stepped into the salon. The stylist, a young woman with vibrant blue streaks in her dark hair, looked up and smiled. Can I help you? I want it all gone, I said, pulling the elastic from my ponytail and letting my hair fall around my shoulders. Short? Different? No. Not me. At least, not the old me. She studied my face, then nodded. I know exactly what you need. I closed my eyes as she worked, the sound of scissors strangely comforting. When she finally turned my chair toward the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My hair now fell in uneven layers framing my face, accentuating cheekbones I'd forgotten I had. You look younger. Beautiful, the stylist said, satisfaction in her voice. I touched the ends of my hair. Yes, I agreed. I do. From the salon, I walked to a small boutique selling locally made clothing. I bought loose linen pants, colorful cotton tops, comfortable sandals, nothing like the designer labels that filled my closet at home. I threw out the clothes I had packed, keeping only the practical items. The woman I had been, the one who wore silk blouses and tailored trousers, who coordinated her accessories with precision, felt like a stranger now. That night, Sophia nodded in approval at my transformation. "Now you look like you belong here." "I'm starting to feel like I do," I admitted. 2 days later, wandering down a quiet side street, I discovered a small art gallery. Paintings of local landscapes filled the walls, vibrant, emotional interpretations of beaches and jungles that captured something beyond mere appearance. An older man sat in the corner sketching. "You like art?" he asked in accented English, noticing my interest. "I used to paint," I replied. "Years ago. Before David. Before I set aside my creative pursuits to support his dreams. Before I became the perfect corporate wife." The man, Miguel, as I would later learn, handed me his sketch pad and a pencil. "Show me." I hesitated, then sat beside him. My first strokes were tentative, but soon my hand remembered what my mind had forgotten: the curve of the coastline, the texture of palm fronds, the play of light on the water. I lost track of time, lost in the simple joy of creation. "You have talent," Miguel said when I finally looked up. "Come back tomorrow. I'll teach you more." And I did. Day after day. The little gallery became my sanctuary. Miguel taught me new techniques. He introduced me to local artists. He encouraged me to experiment. I started with pencil sketches, then moved on to watercolors, then acrylics. Each medium unlocked something that had been dormant inside me. "Your work carries sadness," Miguel observed after a few weeks. "But also strength. This is good art, it must tell the truth." 3 weeks into my stay, I finally accessed my email through the hotel's public computer. Over 200 messages were waiting for me, growing increasingly frantic. Some were from David, others from concerned friends, and a few from my sister, wondering why I wasn't responding to her texts. The most recent message from David was addressed to the police, with me copied. He reported me as a missing person, describing me as emotionally fragile and possibly suicidal. My hands trembled as I logged into our joint bank account, where my monthly allowance from my trust fund was deposited. The balance was 0. Every cent had been transferred to an account I didn't recognize, 2 days after my disappearance. My separate personal account, the one David didn't know about, remained untouched. I leaned back, staring at the screen. He was already cashing in, assuming I was dead, or as good as. The insurance policy hadn't paid out yet, but he had taken what he could reach. The final confirmation of his betrayal should have devastated me. Instead, it steeled my resolve. That night, as I sat on my balcony with a glass of local wine, Sophia joined me. We watched the sunset in a comfortable silence before she spoke. "You look different today. A decision has been made in you. I think it's time to stop running, and start fighting back." Sophia raised her glass. "To phoenixes, rising from the ashes." I clinked my glass against hers. The woman who had arrived at Posada del Mar, broken, betrayed, lost, was gone. In her place sat someone stronger. Someone with a plan. The plan was still forming, unclear, but gaining strength. Over the next few days, I began taking notes, researching legal options, contacting my personal lawyer through an encrypted email service. I was careful, methodical, the way my father had taught me to handle business negotiations. After all, this was the most important negotiation of my life. That afternoon, I was dozing in the hammock on my balcony, lulled by the rhythmic sound of the waves, when an unfamiliar ringtone startled me awake. For a moment, I was disoriented. It wasn't my phone ringing. Then I remembered, the prepaid phone I had bought almost 2 weeks ago. The one I had given to exactly one person, Megan, my assistant. I fumbled for it, heart suddenly racing. "Hello? Mrs. Reynolds?" Megan's voice was low, urgent. "I'm so sorry to disturb you, but there's someone needs to speak with you. It's important." Before I could respond, there was a rustle, then a new voice came on the line, trembling, tearful, but immediately recognizable. "Sophia, oh my God, you're alive. Thank God. I didn't know who else to call. Your assistant wouldn't tell me anything, but I begged." Rebecca. David's sister. My sister-in-law. The woman who had been my friend long before she became my family. How did you get this number? I've been calling everyone, trying to find you. David said you disappeared, that you might have hurt yourself. Her voice cracked. But I knew. I waited, sitting upright, instantly alert. Rebecca, calm down. What's going on? A sob escaped her. There are men at David's house, our house. Dangerous men. They say he owes them money. A lot of money. They threatened him, Sophia. They threatened me. My stomach tightened. What kind of men? The kind who break things, fingers, faces. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They gave him 3 days to pay, or they'll make an example of him. They know about me. About my house. They said if he runs, they'll take my house instead. My mind was spinning. Rebecca owned a small, lovely craftsman house she had bought with her teacher's salary and a loan from her parents. She had renovated it herself, painted every wall, planted every flower in the garden. It was her pride. Her sanctuary. How much does he owe them? I asked, already dreading the answer. 300,000, she whispered. Gambling debts. I had no idea it was this bad, Sophia. None of us did. The pieces locked into place with nauseating clarity. His desperate need for my insurance money. His attempts to access my trust fund. The constant financial setbacks in his business. They hadn't been business losses at all, but gambling debts. When did this start? I don't know exactly. He's always liked betting on games, but this, her voice shook. The men said he's been racking up this debt for over a year. High-stakes poker, sports betting, even some underground casino. She paused. He started taking loans against my house. 2 months ago, I said no. Now I understand why. I closed my eyes, remembering the weekend trips with clients, the late nights at business dinners, the mysterious phone calls he would take in another room, all those lies. Where is he now? Drinking himself stupid at your place, Sophia. He's a mess. Your disappearance destroyed him. The police suspect him in your disappearance, did you know that? And now these men. I'm afraid for him. The irony was almost too much. The husband who had once contemplated my death for financial gain was now being investigated for my disappearance. In different circumstances, it might have felt like perfect justice. Why are you calling me, Rebecca? I kept my voice firm, though my hands trembled. What do you expect me to do? She hesitated. I thought if you came back, explained to the police that you just needed time away, and maybe, with your family's connections, the money. You want me to pay off his gambling debts? It wasn't a question. I know it's a lot to ask, but they'll hurt him, Sophia. Maybe worse. And I'll lose my house, everything I've worked for. Rebecca, always the protector of her younger brother. Always making excuses for him. Always cleaning up his messes. Once, I had admired that loyalty. Now it only saddened me. Does he know you're calling me? No. He thinks she couldn't finish the sentence. My husband thought, hoped, I was dead. And his sister was asking me to rescue him from the consequences of his actions. I need time to think, I said finally. I'll call you back at this number. I hung up before she could respond and immediately called Megan. How did she find you? I demanded. She showed up at the office, hysterical, saying it was a matter of life or death. I'm so sorry, It's okay, I sighed. It's just, no one else can know. Not even if they're crying. After hanging up, I walked down to the beach, my mind spinning. The smart move was to stay hidden. Let David face the consequences of his actions. Let him experience what it felt like to be desperate, scared, alone. The debt collectors weren't my problem. His gambling addiction wasn't my problem. His house wasn't my problem. But Rebecca had been my friend. She had welcomed me into her family when mine had been skeptical of David. She had defended me when their mother made biting remarks about my privileged upbringing. She had been genuine in her affection, unlike her brother. I picked up a stone and threw it into the ocean, watching it disappear beneath the waves. The choice in front of me wasn't just about David. It was about what kind of person I wanted to be in this new life I was building. The woman who ran away in the night was justified in her self-preservation. But the woman I was becoming, stronger, clearer, more purposeful, she needed to make decisions she could live with. I returned to my room and called my lawyer. After explaining the situation, I asked a single question. Can I pay someone else's debt without revealing my location or current status? There was a long pause. It's possible. Complicated, but possible. 2 hours and several phone calls later, I had my answer. I called Rebecca. I'll take care of the debt, I said without preamble. But there are conditions. Her breath caught. Anything. First, David can never know the money came from me. As far as he's concerned, I'm still missing. But the police. I've arranged for evidence of my international travel to be discovered. The investigation will shift from homicide to a missing person who doesn't want to be found. Second, you take David to rehab for his gambling. Real rehab, not a weekend program. Of course. Yes. And third, I continued, you sell your house and move somewhere he doesn't know. Somewhere safer. Silence stretched between us. You think he'd hurt me? I thought of the cabin. His casual discussion about my death. I think a desperate man is unpredictable. And David is very desperate right now. After another long pause, she agreed. Before hanging up, she asked the question I had been dreading. Sophia, what happened? Why did you leave like that? I closed my eyes, debating how much to tell her. Let's just say I heard something that made me realize our marriage wasn't what I thought. Something unforgivable. Another long silence. Was it about me? My breath caught. What do you mean? David, he's always had this idea about you and me. She couldn't finish. You and me what, Rebecca? That we should be together. That I had feelings for you. Her voice was barely audible. That's why his last girlfriend left him. He kept comparing her to you. Then suggesting that we. The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. The voice of his friend echoed in my memory, or finally date her sister without guilt. Not my sister. His sister. Rebecca, I said carefully. What exactly did David tell you about me? The line was silent for so long I thought we had been disconnected. Finally, her voice returned, small and unsure. That you were unstable. That you had episodes. That sometimes you confused reality with fantasy. She paused. He said you accused him of things he never did. That you had paranoid thoughts about him wanting your money. A cold fury settled in my chest, so intense it felt like ice spreading through my veins. Not only had he planned my death, but he had been laying the groundwork to discredit me, painting me as mentally unstable to his own sister. I'm going to help you, Rebecca, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. But after this is over, we need to have a longer conversation about your brother. After arranging the payment of the debt through my lawyer, I made another call, to Carlos Mendez, a private investigator my father had used for corporate matters. I had met him several times at company events and trusted his discretion. I need everything, I told him after explaining my situation. Financial records. Phone records. Emails. Text messages. I need to know exactly who I was married to. This is going to get ugly, Carlos warned. Are you sure you want to see it all? I need to, I replied. For closure, yes, but also for protection. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I continued with my daily rituals, morning walks, art lessons with Miguel, meals with Sophia, but my mind was elsewhere, spinning through possibilities, planning contingencies. The shock of David's betrayal had crystallized into something harder. More tactical. The first report from Carlos arrived via encrypted email on the 4th day. I sat on my balcony with my laptop, took a deep breath, and opened the file. The evidence was methodical, devastating, and far worse than I had imagined. 3 months after our wedding, David had taken out an additional life insurance policy in my name, one I had never seen or signed. The signature on the documents was an acceptable forgery of mine. The beneficiary was listed as David, naturally. The payout? $5 million. I stared at the scanned documents, remembering the weekend David had insisted I try skydiving, despite my fear of heights. The boat trip where he had encouraged me to go out alone, despite an approaching storm. The mountain trail where he had suggested I pose near the cliff's edge, for the perfect photo. All potential accidents. All with witnesses who could testify to his concern, his warnings that I was being too reckless. I moved to the next set of files, phone records. Hundreds of text messages between David and my sister Amelia over the past 8 months. Most were innocuous on the surface, questions about my schedule, comments about family gatherings. But the subtext was clear once you knew what to look for. He was testing boundaries, gauging her interest, making subtle suggestions. Amelia's replies were polite but distant. When he became more explicit in his flirtation, she began replying less frequently. The final exchange was from 3 weeks ago. David, we need to talk in private. I have concerns about Sophia that I can only share with you. Amelia, if you're worried about my sister, talk to her directly or seek professional help. I'm not comfortable with these conversations anymore. I closed my eyes, a wave of gratitude washing over me. Amelia had sensed something was wrong and created distance. She hadn't encouraged it. She hadn't reciprocated. The relief was so intense it brought tears to my eyes. The financial records were next, and they told a story of calculated deception. While claiming his business was struggling, David had maintained a secret credit card I hadn't known about. The statements showed purchases at luxury retailers, fine dining restaurants, expensive hotels, none of which were with me. There were charges from jewelry stores on meaningful dates, my birthday, our anniversary, Christmas, gifts I had never received. For other women? For gambling debts? The purpose wasn't always clear, but the deception was. The most damning evidence was a foreign account in the Cayman Islands, opened 6 months after our wedding. Regular transfers from our joint account, money I had provided for business expenses and investments, had been funneled there. The current balance, $1.2 million. My money. Hidden away for his eventual escape. All while he insisted we needed to budget carefully for our future. All while I had cut back on my own spending to support what I believed was our shared dream. The final document was a draft email found in David's deleted folder. It was addressed to my father's lawyer. In it, he asked about the terms of my trust fund in the event of my death, specifically, whether he would have control of the assets as my spouse. The email was dated 3 weeks ago, just before his trip to the cabin. I closed the laptop, walked to the bathroom, and vomited violently. When the nausea passed, I sat on the cold tile floor with my back against the wall and allowed myself to feel the full impact of what I had discovered. This wasn't just opportunistic betrayal. This was a calculated, long-term con. This was a man who had married me for my money, and was actively planning my death. A knock at my door startled me. Sophia was there, concern etched on her face. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. I tried to smile but failed. Just learning the truth about someone I thought I knew. She sat beside me on the bed as I summarized what Carlos had uncovered. With every revelation, her expression darkened. "Men like this," she said finally, "never face consequences. They slip away, find new victims, start again." "Not this time," I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. "This time there will be consequences." That night, I sent an email to Carlos with new instructions: gather everything, organize it into irrefutable evidence, and prepare to deliver it to the appropriate authorities. I also asked him to discreetly contact Rebecca to ensure she was safe and keeping her promise to seek help for David. His response came within the hour. "Rebecca has moved into her friend's house. David doesn't know where. She has accepted the explanation of a family, anonymous friend, for the debt payment. He is also drinking heavily and making threats about finding you." I forwarded everything to my lawyer with clear instructions: prepare for war, but wait for my signal. Then I opened a new document and began writing a detailed account of my marriage, the overheard conversation at the cabin, my escape, and everything I had discovered since. If anything happened to me, this would be my testimony. As I wrote late into the night, a plan began to take shape, not just for protection, not just for justice, but for reckoning. David had spent years crafting an elaborate fiction. It was time to expose the author behind the mask. The preparation took another week. Everything had to be perfectly timed. Every contingency planned. This wasn't about revenge, a hot, impulsive act fueled by pain. This was about justice, cold, deliberate, and complete. First, I consolidated my financial position. With Carlos's help, I transferred the remaining funds from joint accounts into secure accounts David couldn't access. I contacted credit card companies to flag suspicious activity, backdating the alerts to before my disappearance. I had my lawyer draft an emergency petition to freeze the foreign account, ready to file at the right moment. Then came the legal preparations. I organized every piece of evidence into a comprehensive file: the forged insurance documents, the unauthorized policy increases, the financial fraud, the offshore accounts. Each transgression methodically documented. Every connection clearly mapped. I had Carlos make multiple copies, stored in separate secure locations. My appearance needed to change even more. The haircut was a start, but not enough. I didn't want to be recognized until I was ready. I bought contact lenses that changed my eye color from blue to brown. I selected clothing completely unlike what David was used to seeing me wear, practical, discreet pieces in muted colors. I practiced a slight accent, just enough to make someone hesitate, to question if I was who they thought I was. I booked my return flight under my maiden name, with a layover route that would make tracking my movements difficult. I arranged a rental car from a small local agency that didn't scan IDs into a digital system. The night before my departure, Sophia knocked on my door with a small package. "For protection," she said, handing me a delicate silver charm bracelet. "My grandmother gave it to me when my husband left. She said it keeps you strong when facing those who wish to harm you." I slipped it onto my wrist, touched by the gesture. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she said, embracing me. "Peace. Justice. Whatever it is." "Thank you," I whispered. "For everything." Before leaving Costa Rica, I made the hardest call of all, to my sister Amelia. I used an encrypted messaging app, one I knew she maintained for her international humanitarian work. "Don't react," I said the moment she answered. "It's Sophia. I'm alive. I'm safe." There was a sharp inhale, but she followed my instruction. "I'm alone," she said softly. "What's going on?" "I know what everyone thinks." I needed it to stay that way a little longer. I paused. "I need to ask you something about David." I could hear her shifting position, could imagine her moving to a more private spot in her apartment. "What about him? Has he been contacting you since I disappeared? Asking strange questions? Making inappropriate suggestions?" Her silence was answer enough. "Amelia, please. I need to know everything." "He calls almost daily," she admitted. "At first, it seemed like genuine concern for you. Then, the tone changed. He started to suggest that maybe he needed comfort during this difficult time. That we should meet in private to share our grief." My stomach churned. "Did you?" "God, no." Her voice was fierce. "Sophia, I always thought there was something off about him. Too perfect. Too rehearsed. I never understood what you saw in him." Tears pricked my eyes. If only I had listened to her subtle warnings years ago. "There's something else," she continued hesitantly. "He asked me about your trust fund. Specific questions about what happens to it if you're declared dead." "I need you to do something for me," I said. "It's important that you act normal with him. Don't let him suspect anything." "What's going on? Where are you?" "I can't tell you everything yet, but I will. I promise. For now, I need you to trust me." After a moment, she agreed. My final preparatory step was ensuring Rebecca's safety. I had Carlos arrange a private security service to discreetly monitor her new location. I also set up an emergency fund for her through my lawyer, accessible if needed. She was another of David's victims, manipulated and used in his schemes. She deserved protection. The day before my flight home, I made an anonymous call to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I didn't provide details, just enough information to prompt them to take a closer look at David's activities: insurance fraud, offshore accounts, identity theft. All federal crimes. They wouldn't move immediately, but they would begin. The flight back to the United States felt surreal. 3.5 weeks had passed since I had overheard those fateful words at the cabin. In that time, I had died and been reborn, the naive, trusting woman replaced by someone stronger, clearer, and far more dangerous to David's plans. I arrived at night, driving my discreet rental car through familiar streets that somehow felt foreign. The neighborhoods hadn't changed, I had. As I approached our gated community, I didn't use the main entrance where security might recognize me. Instead, I took the service road I had discovered years ago when I had accidentally locked myself out during a morning run. Our house, a sprawling Tudor-style home with manicured gardens and dramatic lighting, looked exactly as I had left it. The windows on the ground floor glowed warmly. David was home. I parked a block away and walked the perimeter of the property, staying in the shadows. Through the living room window, I could see him pacing, phone to his ear, gesturing angrily. Even from a distance, I could tell he was disheveled, unshaven. The polished, perfect husband was unraveling. I didn't approach the house just yet. Instead, I checked into a small hotel under my new identity. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Tomorrow, when the debt collectors were scheduled to return, expecting the next payment. Tomorrow, when David would discover his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. In my hotel room, I laid out everything I would need: the evidence files, the legal documents, the digital recordings. I charged my devices and prepared the small audio recorder I would keep in my pocket. I slept surprisingly well that night, dreamless and deep. When I woke, I felt no fear or anxiety. Just a calm certainty. I dressed carefully in clothing that revealed nothing. I applied minimal makeup and wore the silver charm bracelet Sophia had given me. As the sun set, I drove back to our neighborhood. This time, I didn't hide in the shadows. I walked straight up our curved driveway, past the fountain David had insisted on, toward the massive front door with its decorative leaded glass. I didn't use my key. I no longer belonged to this house. Instead, I rang the doorbell and waited, standing tall, unafraid, as footsteps approached from inside. The door opened. David stood there, unshaven, hair unkempt, wearing the same Columbia Business School sweatshirt he'd had since we met. For a fraction of a second, he didn't recognize me. The new hair. The contacts. The different clothes. Then his eyes widened in disbelief. "Sophia," he whispered, his face draining of color as if he'd seen a ghost. In a way, he had. I stepped forward without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." He automatically stepped back, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly. I walked past him into the foyer, marble floors echoing under my steps. The house smelled stale, dirty dishes, takeout containers from days ago, the faint odor of whiskey. "You're alive," he finally managed to say, following me into the living room. "Where have you been?" "I've been out of my mind with worry. The police thought that you killed me." I turned to face him, my voice firm. "Yes. I imagine that was inconvenient for your plans." His expression shifted rapidly, shock giving way to tentative relief, then caution. "What are you talking about?" "I've been looking for you everywhere." He moved toward me, arms outstretched as if for an embrace. "Sweetheart. I thought I lost you." I stepped back. "No. Don't even try." The calculated charm appeared, then the expression I had fallen for countless times. The furrowed brow of concern, the soft, wounded eyes, the slight tremble in his voice. "Sophia, whatever you think happened, whatever's bothering you, let me explain." I was at the cabin, David. I watched his face carefully as comprehension dawned. I heard everything. His expression froze, then rearranged itself into hurt confusion. "The cabin? What are you talking about?" "I flew 12 hours through 3 delays to surprise you." I brought your favorite bourbon. I was outside the door and I heard you talking about how my life insurance money would clear your debts. He paled even more, but recovered quickly. You misunderstood. It was a joke. Dark humor between friends. You know how guys talk. And your friends? Joking about dating my sister without guilt if I disappeared? That was also a joke. Not your sister, he corrected automatically, then realized. I mean, no, we weren't, your sister. I finished for him. Yes. Rebecca. She told me about your little obsession. About how you've been trying to manipulate her too. Anger flashed across his face, quickly suppressed. You talked to Rebecca? Where have you been? That's not important. I set my bag on the coffee table and pulled out a thick manila envelope. What matters is what happens next. His eyes locked onto the envelope. What is that? Everything. I opened it and began laying documents out on the table between us. The life insurance policy with my forged signature, bank statements showing transfers to your offshore account in the Cayman Islands, credit card statements for purchases I never saw, records of your gambling debts. With each document, his face grew harder, the pretense of confusion vanishing. You've been investigating me. His voice was low, dangerous. Just discovering who I was really married to. I placed the final document, divorce papers already signed by me. Your choice is simple. Sign these and walk away with what you came into this marriage with, nothing. Or don't, and I take everything to the FBI, the insurance company, and the district attorney. He stared at me, calculation replacing shock. I could almost see him weighing options, searching for leverage, looking for an escape route. You wouldn't get anything, he said finally. No one would believe you. You've been missing for weeks, acting erratically. I've documented your unstable behavior for months. Your paranoid accusations, your mood swings. You mean the groundwork you were laying, telling people I was unstable? That I confused fantasy with reality? I gave him a faint smile. Rebecca told me everything. His expression darkened. You think you're so smart. You and your family, always looking down on me from the beginning. You have no proof of anything. Actually, I do. I pulled out my phone and played a recording, his conversation with the insurance agent requesting an increase to my policy, without my knowledge. The concerned questions. David's smooth lies. The doorbell rang. Before he could respond, I checked my watch. Right on time. That'll be your sister. Rage twisted his features. You brought her into this? After everything I've done for her. You mean using her house as collateral for your gambling debts? Manipulating her emotions all these years? I walked to the door. She deserves the truth too. Rebecca stood on the porch, her expression a mix of nervousness and determination. She had lost weight since I last saw her, dark circles shadowed her eyes. When she saw me, she exhaled sharply. You're back, she whispered, hugging me tightly. I promised I would. I brought her inside, where David stood, tension radiating from him like heat. You two planned this, he demanded, looking between us. My own sister, betraying me? Rebecca straightened her shoulders. No one betrayed you, David. You did this to yourself. I gestured to the paperwork scattered across the table. Rebecca has seen everything, David. She knows about the insurance fraud, the debts, your plans for me. She knows how you used her too. I never would have let them take your house, he told her, his voice softening. You know I'd never hurt you. Rebecca's laugh was hollow. You've been hurting me my whole life, making me responsible for your happiness, your problems, your mistakes. No more. David's charm made one final attempt. He stepped toward me, eyes softening. Sophia, please. Whatever mistakes I've made, we can work through them. I love you. I've always loved you. I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, no longing for what could have been. Only clarity. Sign the papers, David, I said quietly, or the police get copies of everything tomorrow morning. Something in my voice must have convinced him. He knew he was cornered. With a trembling hand, he signed every page I pointed to. "What happens now?" he asked, suddenly looking smaller, diminished. "Now you get what most people in your situation never have, a second chance. The divorce gives you 30 days to leave the state. The debt to those men has been paid. Your criminal activities remain between us, as long as you never contact me, Rebecca, or my family again." Rebecca touched my arm. "Are you sure about this? After everything he's done?" I nodded. "I don't need revenge. I need closure." I gathered the signed papers and the evidence, returning them to my bag. David watched in silence now, the defeat clear in the slump of his shoulders. At the door, I turned back one last time. "The debt collectors won't be back tomorrow, but federal agents might. If you make one wrong move, remember that." Rebecca and I left together. We walked down the curved driveway, past the pretentious fountain, through the wrought iron gates that had once represented security, but now felt like a prison escaped. Neither of us looked back. In my rental car, Rebecca finally broke the silence. "What will you do now?" I touched Sophia's charm bracelet, thinking of the little hotel in Costa Rica, Miguel's art studio, the peaceful mornings watching the sun rise over an endless horizon. "Live," I said simply. "On my own terms. No more dimming my light for anyone." As we drove away, I felt the last chains of my old life fall away. David had wanted my death, but instead, he had given me rebirth. He had wanted my fortune, but I had reclaimed something far more valuable, my sense of identity, my power, my freedom. The road ahead stretched before me, full of possibilities I had once been too afraid to imagine. For the first time in years, I couldn't wait to discover where it would lead me. 3 months later, I stood on the terrace of my new studio by the beach in Costa Rica, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. My latest painting, a woman walking away from shattered glass, was drying on an easel. Sophia appeared with 2 glasses of wine. "Your gallery show next week is already sold out," she said, handing me a glass. "Miguel says you're his most talented student in 20 years. I smiled, thinking about how far I'd come since that night at the cabin. Rebecca had moved to Colorado, using part of the fund I had set up to open the small bookstore she had always dreamed of. My sister Amelia had visited last month, finally meeting the real me. Not the perfect corporate wife, but the artist with paint-stained hands and sun-streaked hair. As for David, I had heard through my lawyer that he had left the country after the FBI began investigating his finances. The insurance company had launched its own fraud investigation. His carefully constructed world had collapsed like a house of cards. I took a sip of wine, feeling the warm breeze against my skin. "You know what the strange thing is?" I said. "I should thank him." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "If I hadn't overheard him that night, I might have spent my entire life being who he wanted me to be, instead of discovering who I really am." "To unexpected blessings," Sophia said, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers. "And to the bourbon left behind." We stayed in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky, and I felt something I hadn't known in a long time, the quiet satisfaction of being exactly where I was meant to be, exactly who I was meant to become. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't making someone pay for what they've done. It's refusing to let what they've done define who you become.